Thork, intern with Indivisible. Thank you for joining us for this candidate screening. Before we begin, I want to briefly review our ground rules to ensure that this process is fair, respectful, and productive for everyone involved. So first, this is going to be a structured screening. Questions have been prepared in advance to ensure consistency and fairness across all of the candidates. Each candidate will be asked the same core questions. So, second, time limits will be observed. So candidates will have 3 minutes to respond to each question, and I will provide gentle reminders to help us stay on schedule. So I'll give a reminder at 1 minute. Third, we are here to focus on issues, not personalities. So we ask that candidates refrain from personal attacks and instead focus on their own positions, qualifications, and vision. Fourth, audience members will be muted. Candidates will have the time at the beginning and end of the screening to provide information on how to contact them if any audience members have questions. Fifth, this screening is being recorded so that members who are unable to attend live will be able to review it later before voting. Finally, we ask that everyone please remain on mute throughout the screening. Our goal is to provide members with clear, substantive information to help them make an informed endorsement decision. With that, we are grateful for your participation and we look forward to a thoughtful discussion. All right, let's begin. Hello, Bailey. How are you?
Well, I'm doing well. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Excited for the conversation and appreciate what you all do.
Okay. All right. Do you want to start with an introduction?
Sure, happy to. My name is Bailey Winder. I'm running for the second congressional district against Jeff Van Drew. I live in Mays Landing. I'm a fourth generation New Jerseyan. My background's in public service. I started my career at the State Department as a civil service professional under the Obama and first Trump administrations. I was an advisor to the FBI for several years, got an MBA, spent a few years in the private sector, and most recently served at USAID on the team of Samantha Power, the head of the agency, before it was unconstitutionally torn down. And really excited about the potential to flip this district. I think this is the year to do it. And looking forward to getting into the issues and answering any questions you all would like.
Awesome. All right. So let's get into it. We're going to start with, should I give the label?
Sure.
We're going to start with healthcare and prescription costs. So, what is your detailed plan to protect and improve access to healthcare, reduce overall costs, and address prescription drug affordability? And how will you fund this?
Sure. So I think that when it comes to the negotiations between the government and the healthcare industry, there's a ton of distortion there and a lot of issues. One of them is that there are conflicts of interest in folks who are getting money from the healthcare industry in a way that I do not think is ethical and should not be allowed. But I believe that we can strengthen the government's negotiating power through legislative measures. And one example that we've seen recently is what's happened with insulin, for instance. But you can take that same kind of approach and apply it to a lot of drugs. Obviously, across the healthcare industry, there are very specialized drugs. There are some drugs that are very general. I think the way that we do this is by having strong accountability and guardrails in these negotiations. And in terms of the way of funding it, right now, if you look at the way funding is being utilized across our government, there are huge issues there. Whether it's with tax cuts for billionaires, the funding that's currently going towards ICE, we should allocate some of that funding to make sure that our healthcare programs are bolstered. But frankly, these healthcare companies, they're making record profits. They have huge lobbying efforts. They can afford to take a hit when it comes to drug prices. And there's a reason why we have a very different picture there from a lot of other countries. So I think some of this is just making it clear that the government's job is to be responsive to the needs of people, not corporations, and have legislation that's built around that.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for your answer. Our next question is regarding the cost of living. What is your plan to lower the overall cost of living for families in NJCD2, including everyday expenses, and how will it make a measurable difference?
Well, I'm relieved that the Supreme Court had a positive ruling towards tariffs today. And I think building off of that, it needs to be made clear that the power of tariffs should never be abused by a White House again in this form. Congress should legislate that and formalize it. This is a power that's always been congressionally mandated, but just like a lot of other things right now is being misused because we don't have checks and balances. And I think that's crucial. We feel that impact every day. Across other areas, I'll speak to utility bills, which I know is a huge point of crisis for us here in South Jersey. We need to push back on monopoly rate hikes and have, again, guardrails when it comes to that. They shouldn't just be able to hike rates whenever they like. So there should be legislation that pushes back there. AI companies that come into our community need to pay their fair share. These companies are offering huge bonuses. They're really making a ton of money. So they need to be responsible for their own expenses. That should not be passed on to the average consumer. Bills are already too high there. I think clean energy tax credits must be strengthened and in some cases restored because those are a win-win for us here in South Jersey when it comes to our pocketbook and also to sustainability and investing in the future of the nature that we love so much here. When it comes to food supply and farms, I believe that there's also a way to have a win-win there in terms of targeted credits that go to support local farmers. I'm not talking big giant corporations like Monsanto, local South Jersey family farms. That way, it's easier for folks across this community to get access to fresh quality and affordable food, and it also strengthens the agricultural sector. When it comes to healthcare, we spoke a bit about drug prices. I think there's a lot that has to be done there. I believe that the cuts to Medicaid are just devastating and clearly creating a huge amount of damage when it comes to access to affordable care, as well as making sure that Medicare is comprehensive. Medicare should include dental, hearing, and vision. Otherwise, folks are having to pay for things that are core fundamental health services. Um, Other things I would point to would be that I believe we should just have more accountability when it comes to the way the corporations come into our lives across the board. This should be community first, not a corporations first approach to governing. Part of that, again, is making sure that we have folks who are not lining their pockets with corporate donations. But there should be legislation that makes that illegal and ensures that folks actually representing our community have the best interests of constituents in mind and answer to them and them alone.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Our next question is regarding schools. What do you believe the role of the federal government is in public education?
I believe the role of the federal government is to strengthen and invest in public education that is well funded and also provide teachers with the tools and support that they need beyond just funding. The unconstitutional dismantling of the Department of Education was a terrible loss for our country, and that's totally unacceptable. So that has to be built back up. I've spoken with a lot of teachers recently across unions, teachers in school districts around here about the lack of security around benefits for them and their pensions. There's no better investment for us to make in the future of our community than education. It has the best ROI. So we need to make sure that our strength here in a state where public education is so excellent traditionally is maintained. And another part of that, I would say, is the freedom for teachers to manage their curriculums and not have intervention from the federal government that's not appropriate. We should not have big government overreach that's telling teachers what books you should have in class and how you should be teaching. That's not, in my opinion, the job of the federal government. So I think there's a lot of work to be done. But first and foremost, it's about consistent and steady funding and making sure that teachers get the benefits and compensation they deserve because it's really difficult work and it's not right that teachers nowadays in often cases can barely even get by.
Thank you for your answer. All right. So, climate and environmental justice. What is your plan to address climate impacts in NJO2 and ensure fair distribution of federal environmental resources?
Sure. So a few things right off the bat. FEMA needs to be strengthened and supported. We're looking at a moment now where FEMA may be cut by 50% in its workforce. That would be devastating for us here in NJ2. We know what Hurricane Sandy did across the state, and we could only imagine how much worse it would be in the future without FEMA having the right resources. That's a non-negotiable. Dune replenishment, beach erosion, there has to be consistency with that funding. Jeff Andrew has failed on this in front of all of us to see, and now he's pretending like there's a problem that he can help fix that he did not create in the first place, which is really, really frustrating and makes me furious. Um, we should recognize that investing in the strength of nature here in South Jersey is not just about sustainability, it's also about small businesses and making sure that our economy is strong. So again, I think that the approach to it has to be comprehensive, not just about one piece of it, but across the board. And when it comes to energy sources and energy supply, we have a supply demand issue here. New Jersey used to be a net exporter of energy. We're now a net importer. Down here, there's a lot of potential that we have that's untapped, and we should look at all our different options. One great example of that is solar, which is quick, it's easy, it's efficient. It actually has a lot of bipartisan support. We should lean into these things, and we should have a community-led discussion about next steps here, because I think there's been a lot of misinformation. There's been a lot of worries about Washington, D.C. coming in with a heavy-handed approach. Well, this is our community, and we want to make sure that the approach to the environment is based on what we all are comfortable with, and I think start from the bottom up, not the top down.
Awesome, thank you. Our next question is regarding data centers. Given
Mhm.
concerns about everything associated with data centers, um, how would you approach this and what concrete actions would you take?
Well, there's no doubt it's a huge issue already. It's only becoming bigger, and we're seeing data centers pop up in places like Vineland. There are plenty more that are likely to be on the way. We need the government to act very quickly when it comes to this because the world of AI and data centers is simply moving too fast. So I support legislation to ensure that there's an independent environmental review. You cannot trust a corporation concerned about its bottom line to give a presentation on its environmental impact. That's just not credible. And then there need to be protections around the average ratepayer and taxpayer when it comes to our cost of living. These AI companies should pay their fair share, and they should ensure that any environmental risk is something that's on them to address. But there needs to be transparency in this. When it comes to the Vineland data center, I set up a petition to Mikey Sherrill on that, where we got more than 1,600 signatures from folks across the area, spoke at a city council meeting, and also sent a letter to the CEO of Data One, the company behind the data center, saying if there are any conflicts of interest with compensation for current or former New Jersey public officials and their families, we need to be made aware of that because the way that things are moving, it raises a lot of question marks. But I think this is a classic example of corporations getting the VIP treatment while community concerns are too often being left behind. We need to flip that equation right now. And projects of this size, this scale, once they're up, it's very difficult to change the reality of the situation. So I'm in favor of legislation and approach to politics that make sure that things move at a pace that allows for proper transparency and an understanding of what this will mean across water usage, the possibility of droughts, noise, pollution, the impact on the agricultural sector. It's so complex. So there's a lot of work to be done here. And I believe that the US government needs to invest more strongly in resources and frankly just members meeting to talk about this. It's one of the biggest challenges in my opinion going forward for us as a society.
Thank you. Our next question is in regards to affordable housing. So what is your plan to make housing more affordable and stable for residents across NJCD2?
Sure. I think one part of it is that we need to have regulations around housing and construction that are responsible but also efficient. And I've heard some examples recently in NJ2 of regulations that are out of touch with what we're facing here in 2026. So we should scrutinize things and apply critical thinking there. I'm not in favor of bureaucracy that holds us back from responsible development. And I do know that there have been some challenges in recent years with that. Another part of it is that you have private equity companies and large corporations that are buying up houses left and right by the thousands or tens of thousands. There needs to be regulation to manage that because the priority for housing should be an individual and a family. It should not be a private equity company. So I believe that there are ways to have incentives and tax credits that specifically apply to first-time home buyers and give them a level of preference that helps to ease that burden. That couples with property tax relief. But we also need to recognize that a lot of folks rent now because buying a home simply feels unaffordable. So it should not just be property tax relief. That should be paired also with relief programs when it comes to rent. Again, for first time home buyers and for folks who are looking to rent a place to provide stability for their family in a working family context. But I do think that we need to expand our resources when it comes to this. We need to move forward with an approach that's environmentally sustainable, but that's also highly efficient and allows for new supply to come in.
Thank you. Our next question is regarding immigration. So, what is your comprehensive plan for federal immigration policy, and how would you ensure it is humane, lawful, equitable, and effective for our communities?
Sure. I think our immigration system as a country has been broken for a long time. And White Houses before this one have played a role in that. Both parties have played a role in that. What we're seeing right now is a moment that is totally unsustainable. And this is not the way to move forward when it comes to law and order, when it comes to responsible activity in our communities. I don't think it's making us any safer when we see agents with masks on and the belief they have total immunity going around places like Pleasantville and Atlantic City and grabbing folks, making people afraid to even leave their homes to go to school, to go to church, to go to work. That is not the way forward here. I want to invest in an immigration reform that actually addresses the root of these issues, which includes having more judges to adjudicate immigration cases, leveraging technology at the border to make sure that we have a high tech approach to management and oversight. We have a lot of money in our immigration program. It's just being used in some ways that are irresponsible. We need to be clear about, frankly, constitutional rights and accountability. It's unacceptable that local law enforcement is being undercut by federal ICE agents who think that they can do whatever they want. That is not the right equation. And I believe that we should, again, invest in thinking about the initial causes that lead to challenges in immigration down the line. Even when I worked at USAID, we did a lot of work on migration. That's part of this equation, right? Because it's not just about when someone enters a community, it's about far before that. When it comes to humane treatment, there absolutely need to be red lines there. It's inexcusable that we have tens of thousands of folks in detention centers right now. We don't know who's who. We don't know what their family situation is. They're being treated in a way that is oftentimes totally unacceptable. And that's why we need Congress to step up and do its job, to use its power of oversight, hold hearings, and in some cases consider saying, until you make changes, there's going to be a pause on funding. Because I think this is a prime example of how Congress has the power of the purse. It needs to use that leverage when the White House is acting in this way. But ICE needs to be reformed and we need to actually tackle the root issue. I want a secure border. I want violent offenders to be treated appropriately by our legal system and apprehended. But it cannot just be this guessing game of who comes into our community today and who comes out of it. That's not doing right by South Jersey, and it's not making this problem any better.
Got it. Thank you. This is regarding money in politics. What is your position on the role of money in politics, and what changes would you pursue to address it?
Well, I think the relationship between money and politics in this country is horrible, and it's totally disgusting that we are in a nation where one person can spend hundreds of millions of dollars on one election cycle, where corporations can pump dark money into elections without transparency and without pushback. I'm in favor of some very aggressive reforms when it comes to this. I signed a pledge to end Citizens United, and in Congress, I will vote to overturn Citizens United without any hesitation. I believe that we should not have any corporate PAC money in politics, and I don't take a cent of corporate PAC money. I never will. I also believe that we need to ban individual stock trading for members of Congress and members of the executive branch and their close family members because it is such an obvious conflict of interest. Again, this is something that happens on both sides of the aisle. And it needs to be called out for what it is. One thing I believe is you can't do this in a hypocritical way and only talk about a few people. This has to be across the board change. It, as someone who's been in public service and seen the different ways that this plays out, people get into public service because they want to make our country better, safer, stronger. It's not for the fame and fortune, at least in most cases. But when you look at some of these members of Congress and the chart of their net worth when they're in office, it is corruption in plain sight. How are you going to make the best decision for your constituents when it comes to a bill on defense or healthcare when you're taking money from those industries? I mean, I think it's totally ridiculous. And I'm proud to have a strong platform around ethics and integrity because we need to make change here immediately. It cannot wait, and it's making our democracy weaker each and every day.
Thank you. Our next question is on constituent accessibility. How will you ensure meaningful, consistent access and accountability to the people of NJ2?
Well, constituent services, there's no doubt for a member of Congress are it's absolutely one of the top responsibilities. I've held 7 town halls so far during this campaign. Part of my platform is a commitment to a minimum of 1 town hall per quarter across the district. And I think it's incredibly offensive that we have a member of Congress who does not even hold town halls and take questions from the people he works for. But another part of it is making sure that as a member, I invest in an office that has strong constituent services in terms of my staff and my funding. So I will make sure that across this large district, which, as you know, it's a lot of ground to cover, there's accessibility for folks in different areas. One of the problems that we've had is people in certain parts of the district feeling like they're left behind and not getting the attention they deserve. So I believe that's an important piece of things. But it's essential, and I think it's about being there for the right reasons and being available. My DMs are open today, and I'm available to reach in all sorts of ways, and I want to maintain that same energy in Congress. And I understand it's a demanding job, and you have a lot of different directions you're pulling yourself in. But if you're a member of Congress and you're in DC, whatever 90% of the time, you're not doing your job the right way because it has to be locally grounded representation. The title of the job is representative, and I think that says a lot about what the job description entails. That must be stuck by. That's another reason why I think term limits are important because folks get too entrenched in DC. They lose sight of who they're there to serve. They're too busy doing the steakhouse dinners with lobbyists and not spending enough time here. And Van Drew's here for the fundraisers and the ribbon cuttings. I will be here to do the work day in and day out and do listening sessions. The other day, I went to do a small business listening tour in Pleasantville and just went into different shops and stores, talked with folks, asked them what was going on in their mind. And I think that's important too, because constituent services is a whole basket of different things. And you have to approach all the different areas of it with specific focal points. So I appreciate the emphasis on that, and I think it cannot be understated enough that constituent services has to be consistent, strong, and well financed.
Awesome, thank you. The next question is on economic justice and leadership. What does economic justice mean to you in NJ2, and how will you demonstrate independence and consistency in advancing your priorities?
I think economic justice means that you cannot have a system where different folks have different opportunities to make their business stronger, to take part in the economy. It needs to be accessible. It needs to be transparent. It needs to be free, again, from conflicts and corruption. And we've had a lot of challenges across South Jersey when it comes to certain vulnerable populations and minorities being left behind as well in some ways. So that has to be called out clearly. We need to look at the data and make sure that we strengthen programs that give all folks a fair shot. It should be a level playing field. I think that's what economic justice truly is at its core. And a lot of that, to the point we were just speaking about, is hearing from different folks and making sure that you have a diversity of perspectives around you. It cannot just be an echo chamber type approach because that's when you make decisions that don't benefit the community as a whole. But I believe that we can make economic strides here that are accessible and inclusive. One example of that is you look at 4-year colleges. Well, you should also look at vocational programs, right? And opportunities for folks who do not feel like it's suitable for them or like they have the opportunity to take a 4-year college path. Those investments end up over the course of someone's life really creating a lot of benefit and ROI for them and for the community. And we also need to make sure that small businesses get resources, not just large corporations. It's inexcusable that we have politics where the big corporations get all the breaks, get the red carpet rolled out. We need to invest in and strengthen the small businesses that are actually the backbone of our community and make sure that labor and unions are invested in as well. So organized labor is another part of that that I believe strongly needs to be protected. That should be a clear red line. If you're anti-union, you do not have a place representing South Jersey that I think is working for the people.
Thank you. Our next question is regarding Democratic leadership. What is your assessment of recent party leadership decisions, and how would your approach compare?
I think that Democratic leadership is entrenched. I think there are folks who have been there for too long and they're largely out of touch with the reality day to day of working families. We need to, as a Democratic Party, get back to the core strength of this party, which is getting to work for nurses, for veterans, for teachers, for union members. There's been too big a disconnect recently, and I believe that the Democratic Party needs to be shaken up. If you look at the last couple cycles, there were a ton of self-inflicted wounds, a ton of avoidable moments. And I think of Biden's debate with Trump, which was just such a nightmare moment and unacceptable. I think of the fact that we have some folks in Democratic leadership today who are not willing to stand up against this Trump administration in clear and assertive ways. This is not the moment for business as usual politics. And I believe that anyone in power who's treating it like that is not meeting the moment. Yes, Democrats are in the minority right now. Yes, you have less power than Republicans, but that does not mean you should sit back idly. I think you need to take risks right now. You need to use your power in different ways. And I would be in favor of using tactics that I think are more aggressive, more bold, because we're in a constitutional crisis. Our system of checks and balances has largely collapsed. How do you get back from that? It's by having folks in Congress and folks in party leadership who understand the direction things are going and recognize the seriousness of this. This is not a time to sort of go through the motions. It cannot be. So I believe we need more fight, and I think we need to use our leverage better. And folks who are there today should understand that across oversight, hearings, nominations, the budgetary process, there's a lot that can be done, and every ounce of it should be considered. I don't think there should be any exceptions to that when you take a look at what's happening in this day and what might happen tomorrow, which is just a constant guessing game where Congress is largely sitting by idly, and the White House thinks it can do whatever it wants. Oh, I think you're muted.
I know, I know. Thank you. Thank you for your answer. Our next question is regarding foreign policy. So, what are your positions on current international conflicts and U.S. global alliances, and how do they reflect your values? Where should foreign aid be allocated?
Well, I think it's shocking that we're in a moment where the US is undertaking regime change in Venezuela, talking about buying Greenland, and we might strike Iran tomorrow again because we do not have an executive branch that's being held accountable and that understands the way the government works. We need to get back to the business of investing in partnerships and diplomacy that makes our country stronger as well as lifts up our allies. And whether it's NATO, whether it's rebuilding USAID, whether it's playing a productive role in the path towards peace in the Middle East, there's a lot that can be done. But the current approach to foreign policy is transactional. It's not working well at all. And one example of that we just saw is the fact that the United Arab Emirates put $500 million into a Trump family crypto company and got access to some of the most coveted AI chips in the world. That is a type of transaction that should never, ever happen again when it comes to the White House in a foreign country. That is corruption in plain sight. And we need to be clear-eyed about this moment. If you look at USAID's dismantling, which again, I served there for the past several years, it's a huge loss for our country. This was an investment in the strategic power of the US. It was about health, migration, American businesses doing business abroad, and about alliances that make sure that we have a long-term game plan for our role in the world. The vacuum that pulling out of USAID is left behind is one that Russia, China, and other competitors are seizing upon in sub-Saharan Africa, and all over the world. So there's a ton of work that needs to be done to get back to real diplomacy. But if you take Iran, for example, the platform cannot be, let's think about a military strike tomorrow and roll the dice without thinking things through. It has to be about diplomacy, partnerships, and understanding the lay of the land before making rash decisions that put US troops, resources, and national security at risk. That is not the way to do foreign policy, and that's definitely not America First foreign policy. So I believe that across allies in the EU and Canada, there are a lot of relationships right now that are incredibly strained. because of the role of this White House and because of the conduct of the Trump administration. It's ridiculous to be bullying Canada, one of our greatest partners, a country that invests a lot in the Jersey Shore in terms of tourism, for instance, and picking a fight for no good reason. So there needs to be a approach to diplomacy that's responsible and that's well thought out. It cannot just be a shoot from the hip approach when the stakes are simply too high,
20 seconds.
including with our competition with China.
Awesome. Thank you for your answer. Our next question is regarding the Trump administration. How will you approach working with or opposing policies from the Trump administration while representing NJ2?
Well, we have to recognize that checks and balances have largely collapsed in this moment. And as a member of Congress, I will use my power and my leverage in this position to ensure that I put the people of South Jersey first, that I'm working for you all and this community and not for the White House. And I don't care if it's a Democratic or Republican administration. I believe that if there are opportunities to collaborate in a way that will benefit New Jersey's second district, those should be explored. Those should not be ruled out. At the same time, whether it's tariffs, immigration, or the War Powers Act, Congress needs to do its job. And as someone who's served in the executive branch and seen the other side of this equation, I know how much power Congress has when it chooses to use it. I will not hesitate to use that power. I will not hesitate to hold this administration accountable and make it clear that once we take back the House, there are going to be debates and there are going to be red lines about what will happen when it comes to the budget, when it comes to oversight and across the board. So it cannot be a moment where you have members of Congress with multiple allegiances. We have a system with co-equal branches of government, but Congress is not co-equal right now. And that's because of folks like Jeff Van Drew. And I look forward to changing that equation and being a voice in Congress that's independent and that puts South Jersey first, not corporate PACs, not the White House, not foreign interests.
Thank you. Our next question is regarding gun control. What is your position on federal gun safety legislation, and what changes would you actively work to pass in Congress?
Sure. I think there are common sense legislative steps that we need to move forward quickly. And a few examples of those are a ban on assault weapons that don't have a place on the streets of our community, making sure that we have red flag laws that are robust and that uh, lead to avoiding really catastrophic crises and things that do not have to occur. I also believe that we need to invest more strongly in mental health resources and support around that because that ties into all of this quite strongly. But there's a way to have responsible gun ownership without the federal government just opening up any restrictions and not having accountability as it relates to that. There should be a community first effort where law enforcement is looped in as well strongly. And we have to make it clear that this is about safety for our kids, for our community. This is to avoid the kind of shootings that happen in the US too often. But I would start with assault weapons and I would start with red flag laws that make it uh, that make it more possible to avoid the kind of tragedies that we see.
Thank you. This is going to be our closing question, and it's going to have multiple different parts. So here we go.
All
So
right, sounds great.
among the many pressing issues facing our country today, which one do you consider to be your highest priority and why? If elected, what specific steps would you take to advance this issue in Congress? What would be your primary legislative goal during your first 2 years? And how does it reflect your broader mission serving in office?
Well, thank you for asking that multi-tiered question. I think my top priority would be changing our politics so that we have legislation that puts working families first. And that's across healthcare and the cost of living when it comes to groceries, utilities, and all of that. But we are in a moment where working families are getting absolutely crushed. And at the same time, the stock market is soaring. The big corporations are walking away with low taxes and huge profits. That needs to be changed immediately. And I believe that part of that is cleaning out the corruption. Part of that is ensuring that we have a system of economic approaches that are equitable and that put working families first. So I would push for legislation where billionaires and big corporations get taxed the way they deserve to be taxed. Amazon paid 1.4% effective tax rate on $90 billion of profit last year. That is ridiculous. And I would use that money to strengthen Medicaid and the basic services that are the foundation of a lot of what our government offers folks. Medicare and Medicaid, Social Security cannot be compromised. They are too important and they are too big in their reach. So I would in some ways propose a reverse big beautiful bill, a bill that taxes billionaires more in order to fund programs like Medicaid the way that they deserve to be funded. And I think that that is where we start because the damage across our community right now is simply too great. Healthcare is unaffordable, and folks are experiencing cost of living emergency while this White House is going off and talking about Greenland and El Ballroom. It cannot be this way. The way that I think about public service has been shaped by my own experience across my career, by the fact that I grew up in a family of folks amongst my grandparents who served in the military, the State Department, and the CIA. I've taken that oath to the Constitution multiple times. Across my service at the State Department and USAID, I've worked for Democratic and Republican administrations. And my approach is to be practical, to be driven by the needs of this district, and to make it clear that we have to change this equation because politics is broken. Politics is corrupt, it's entrenched. We are paying the price for it day in and day out. And again, if you want to know why checks and balances matter,
30
look no
seconds.
further than 2026.
Awesome. Thank you. So that was our screening. I have one final question for you though. How would
Please.
our members be able to contact you if they had questions?
Sure. Well, as I said, my DMs are always open on social media, and then beyond that, have my website with a form to fill out. Um, info@winderforcongress.com is one of the email addresses that I use, and I would love to speak with any and all of you. I can also follow up and email you more contact info, but I'm always here to answer questions and comments, and please do let me know if you have any follow up.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm going to turn it to Alice.
Thank you so much for your time,
Hey,
Bailey.
Alice.
Once we've concluded all of our candidate screenings, we will be posting the videos on YouTube and we will be in touch if we decide to move forward with an endorsement decision.
Excellent. Well, thank you, all of you. It's a privilege to get to join you at events and stand in solidarity with you, and grateful for your fight in this moment because we need to be all hands on deck. And I really, really appreciate this opportunity. I hope to be able to earn your endorsement, and I'll look forward to talking more soon.
Thank you, Bailey. Have a good night.
Thank you. You too. Bye.